Well, good morning, everybody. Glad you've joined me for today's devotion. We are wrapping up the book of Philippians today. We are in chapter 4. And I imagine some of you have noticed I've been wearing the same shirt. Today makes 5 devotions in a row. And this is the same Dr. Pepper that I had when I started 5 days ago. But you're smart people, and you know that I've sat down in one session and recorded these 5 devotions all in the same setting. So, but I like to just play games every now and then. Got nothing to do with the devotion. Some of you, I've had some people ask, do you get up every morning and go do those devotions? No, I sit down and record 2 or 3 at a time, sometimes 5 or 6 at a time. That's what's going on. So, just a little insight there. All right, chapter 4 of Philippians. A couple of things. One is that verse 2 really jumped out at me because it's just a reminder that relationships take work. Okay, they really do. They take work. Look at what he said in verses 2 and 3. I urge Euodia and I urge See, it's okay if you don't know how to pronounce one of these names. I'd have to look it up. Syntyche, or something like that. I urge these 2 women to live in harmony in the Lord. Indeed, true companion, I ask you, about the true companion in verse 3 is the church there in Philippi. So I'm asking you, dear church, I ask you also to help these women, these 2 women there in verse 2, to help these women who have shared my struggle in the cause of the gospel, together with Clement, another person, a man, also, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. What's going on here is these 2 women who had worked tirelessly with Paul at one point, and faithful servants of Jesus and of the church, They had a disagreement. We don't know really who they are. We don't know what the disagreement was, but these are 2 saints who loved God and had been faithful servants, but they disagreed on something. And Paul says, I'm urging each of them to live in harmony. And dear companion, dear church, will you help them get over their difference? Will you help them learn how to live together in harmony? Because their fellow servants, they're saved the same way. That should be more important than whatever this thing is that they disagree on. And you know, that's a microcosm of life. There are going to be moments in each of our lives, not just one moment, but multiple moments all the way along, where we're going to have to work hard at staying in relationship with people. I think one of the reasons so many marriages end in divorce is some people never learn that you've got to do the hard work of making the relationship work. One of the reasons so many people hop from church to church is because they get mad and get their feelings hurt because they never learned that part of being a disciple is doing the hard work of making relationships work. One of the reasons brothers and sisters who are in their 40s or 50s or 60s never talk to each other is because they haven't learned sometimes that you've got to do the hard work of making relationships work. Now, does it take both? Yes, but you got to work at it. It's work to forgive. It's work to be patient. It's work to let things slide. It's work to give a little and sacrifice and not demand your own way or your own preference all the time. It's work. And sometimes it's work because it's not always going to be 50-50. Sometimes it might be 80-20. But sometimes the relationship's worth it. And it takes work. And by the way, that's part of discipleship. See, for so long in our modern churches, we have thought of discipleship as making sure we know stuff. Let's do a lot of Bible studies. Let's read these books. valuable, important, good. Knowledge is part of discipleship, but knowledge alone is not discipleship. Do you know that part of growing in Jesus, of being a disciple and growing as a disciple, is doing the hard work of relationships? Because it's in the hard work of relationships that you actually grow and become a better disciple, a better person. If you never work hard at relationships, you don't grow as a disciple. I don't care how much Bible you know. And so part of doing discipleship in a church is helping people do the hard work and not just run away. And that's what Paul is doing here. He's discipling this church. He's discipling these two women. Well, that's the note on relationships. Real quickly, the second note from this chapter for me is in the area of evangelism. When Paul's wrapping up his letter, and in verse 22, he says, all the saints greet you, those believers who were with him when he writes this letter to the Philippians. It's when he's in prison in Rome. And he says, all the saints here greet you, especially those of Caesar's household. Interesting note. Caesar, the common name for the Roman emperor. Now, household doesn't necessarily mean the emperor, who was probably Nero's relatives. It could have been somebody in his kin, but you can't say that definitively. This is a term referring to all who were part of Caesar's governance. So it could be slaves, it could be courtiers, it could be servants, it could be officials, people who are connected with the administration, so to speak. Whether they were free people, slaves, important people, way down the line people, but there were people in the administration of the Roman government, of Nero's government, who had become believers. And they were sending their greetings to those disciples in Philippi. And Paul also said something about it back in chapter 1 of this book, in verse 12 and verse 13. Philippians 1. Go ahead and look at it real quickly in verses 12 and 13. He says, now I want you to know, brethren, that my circumstances have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel, so that my imprisonment in the cause of Christ has become well known throughout the whole Praetorian Guard and to everyone else. So Paul's in prison, and he said, God has taken what they meant for bad and used it for good. You know, like Romans 8:23, all things work together for good to those who love God and are the called according to his purpose. Not that all things are good, but that if you are faithful to God and living out his will and purpose for your life, God will take things and use them for good. Paul says, I'm in prison here in Rome, and they meant it for evil, but man, it's turned out for the good, because the Praetorian Guard, those Roman soldiers and court officials who were part of his prison and trial process, we're all hearing about Jesus. And then you get over to the end of the chapter, he said, these people in Caesar's household, these people who are part of the Roman government, the Roman administration, if you will, they're not only hearing about Jesus, but a lot of them are becoming believers. And by the way, they ended up being a pretty good church, pretty strong church in the city of Rome. And so what does this mean for us? That we don't allow circumstances to dictate whether or not we are faithful to Jesus. We don't allow circumstances to dictate whether or not we share the gospel and talk to people about Jesus and invite people to church and speak up for Jesus. Whatever our circumstances are, they are an opportunity, not a hindrance. They are an opportunity to share Jesus, to share the gospel, to encourage other believers. Paul's example is a great example for us to follow and learn from. So, hope that helps you. I'll see you tomorrow as we have now wrapped up the book of Philippians, and we will start back in Psalms for about a week and a half. We'll be in Psalm 113 tomorrow. God bless you, everybody. Hey, invite somebody to church. Invite somebody to church. God bless you.